Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Welcome back to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard with your host, Bill Scarily. And, Bill, we had to look up a definition before this episode, and boy, is it really interesting. And this now become the subject of our episode today. And the term is called Potemkin village. And, in context, reading some recent writings, some articles and things, it made some sense. But when you look up the definition, it's kind of like it's like a jaw-dropping thing. And let me share it with our listeners. A Potemkin village signifies any deceptive or false construct conjured often by cruel regimes to deceive both those within the land and those peering from outside.
Wow, that's a heck of a definition, is what that is.
It really is. It's scary honesty, I think, too, because it's familiar. When you read that definition, it's like, oh, that sounds really familiar. And I think as Americans, we may be, experiencing some of this.
Well, it's interesting. I think the one of the things that you were mentioning to me as we're kind of getting going today was there's a article in a series of different news outlets are really kind of talking about this. And who was the original article from? I guess was it
Well, there's several. There was a Washington Post article.
Washington Post, yeah,
this past weekend, and then also this one on MSNBC. And I know some people listening to this that may not like some of those outlets are probably going to, dismiss the articles as being biased because of, the outlets that they're being published in. However, if you really take the time to read the articles, and we have the links in the blog post at purchasingtruth.com for this episode, you'll find that the sources of this articles are Trump administration officials, and they talk about how they are creating a Potemkin village for the president on a daily basis, especially as it relates to the realities of the coronavirus.
So, if they're only feeding him good news, if they're only feeding him the news he wants to hear, what does he do with news he doesn't want to hear, Tom? What one of the things what are the staffers so afraid of? Does the article go into that?
Right, it really does. What it's saying is that what the staffers who are still there in the White House have learned is that if they don't present to the president a rosy scenario, a positive feedback loop, that then Trump he'll just get rid of them. They'll be, cast as, not a team player, not being helpful, not being productive, and they get marginalized, if not fired. And so in the sake of self-preservation, a lot of the president's staffers are giving him only the news that he wants to hear as much as possible. And one of the big examples of this that the article points out was the Axios interview on HBO with Jonathan Swan, where Trump brings out all these printouts of the U.S. number of deaths as
Right.
percentage of cases, where Jonathan Swan looks at that, and what this article says is his own staff, White House staff, helps steer him in bad directions. They're feeding his worst instincts, providing him with what they call bogus proof that makes him feel better about really this pandemic, which is just an utter disaster. And as a presidential leader, it's a catastrophic failure in reality. But they're feeding him what he wants to know. And so, Jonathan Swan, he goes through and these documents, and clearly, Trump didn't print those out for himself. Some staffer gave them to him as talking points, right?
Right. And if you're just getting the papers and you're trying to use them as a prop or a talking point, it doesn't go so well because you haven't done the due diligence to say, okay, what form or what possible truth am I going to pitch off of this, other than a very look, it says it right here on this chart, and then you are left with, it's like, what's on this chart? Oh, you mean the number of deaths? It's not the number of tests. It's not the number of deaths. I was talking the number of deaths, and immediately he's going like, I don't know the relationship between testing and deaths. I don't know how that comparison is, and stuff.
Well, and Jonathan was saying that it's really, he was talking about deaths as a percentage of population, which is a fixed proportion ratio that you can have. You have this many people in the country, how many people are dying, and of course, how many people are dying per day. We can definitely have a really productive debate in this country about, are we testing enough people? Are we not? And I would agree wholeheartedly that to look at, how many people are infected versus how many are not, or how many have died related to how many have been conclusively tested, is really, in many ways, not a helpful, comparison. But when you look at absolutes, if you got this many people in the country and this many deaths, it's pretty hard to debate that.
Yeah, that's not the okay. So you and I are experiencing what I would call the fact vortex. We're getting swirled into the circle of the vortex of talking about facts. I feel like I'm on one of those one of the MSNBC shows where they're talking around in circles, but we're not talking about the facts here. And the answer is that's facts are not helpful with this situation. Communication needs to move into an empathy discussion about, are we talking about what safety looks like? Are we talking about how to return to stability? See, these are all winning talking points for the president if they choose to pivot there. Here's the things that we've done to protect. Here's the things that we've done for stability. Here's the things that we have done to get progress. Those are all winning points for him.
Sure.
And then he can do his best to spin whatever small pieces of evidence he has to try to support those three talking points. Not having skilled communicators around him creates this things. And if they're afraid of his tantrums, it's like you got bad parents. They're in a restaurant and you got a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old teeing off in the middle of a crowded restaurant, and the parent that's going like, this kid's upset. Let's meet the need for consideration for others. Let's take him outside and talk to him about the thing that they're upset about and talk him down. It's almost like his tantrums has gotten in the way of truth telling, so that all that's left for the people that are around him is to set up these false constructs of positivity. I feel like that America is not turning, not being run from a White House, but being run from a gingerbread house. It's sort of like, here's all these candies outside oh my gosh, any cartoonist could really have a little bit of fun with this one. But it's, here's the White House and here's this candy. In fact, I'm thinking of a cartoonist right now that would love to draw this. So it's like, here is the candy, children, and we're just going to talk positively about the candy that's available. And just like Hansel and Gretel being, seduced into the lair, what's happening is that Americans are regrettably being put in the oven that they don't even know that they're being put in. This type of metaphor is so helpful for us because, when the unawareness if we're being attracted to a marketing, a branding image of America versus the reality of, hey, yeah, you can have a gingerbread house every once in a while, but having it for dinner on a daily or for 3 meals a day, being in this place of positivity with a false construct around it, and meanwhile people are dying in the back, in the kitchen in the back, that's not the America that we would like to have those leaders in charge with. So, that's a little bit about, and so what do you think, Tom? To create a Potemkin village for your kids, what would you need to do?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think the reality is we do create a Potemkin village for our children as, at times in their lives, because they are not mature enough to handle the scary honesty.
Yes.
And so I think we all do that. I did this just recently, actually, with my children, when we were gonna move into a new home, and the deal was done. And after the deal was done, we showed them the house to get them used to the idea, and which we wanted to slowly do and not make it abrupt change, because one of my children's never lived in any other house than the one that we're in, that she was born in. And this house had a pool and a spa. And, if anybody who's dealing with coronavirus in Southern California knows, all our community pools are closed. So, this was a really exciting thing. Well, there ended up coming this major problem with the house, and anyway, it was just very complicated. And rather than getting into the details, we could not take possession of that house through no fault of our own, but we could not, move to it. And we had to unwind this with our children. And there was actually a problem that had to do with, health and safety for my family, protection, things like that. It was it was a dangerous reason I had to, I had to, say, nope, I'm out. We're not moving to this house. But I didn't want to tell my children that, because that scary honesty is something that they're not really old enough to process. And I don't want them to have nightmares about it.
Right. Or the new house. They will collapse the old thing into the new thing. Okay. Right. All right. Yeah. So if you want to move again to find a house that is, they'll think, well, is this house dangerous? Because the other one, Dad, you were told this was dangerous.
It was dangerous, right. So I created a Potemkin village, which was letting them know, really made up a story about why we were not going to be moving there. It had more to do with a structural problem with the house that's going to require construction, and it's going to take months, and we're not going to move into it. So a reason that was believable and something they could understand, but was not the scary honesty. So that I actually, it's very interesting that I've just had this experience like within the last few weeks. And that is what an example of the type of thing that's happening with the president. And the interesting thing is that, when you read these articles of I'll have the links for in the blog post at purchasingtruth.com, you really, check it out. It's very interesting because, while some people might want to suggest that, the president's the victim here because, his White House staffers are not
Right.
giving him accurate information, giving him partial truths, rosy scenarios in a
Right.
positive feedback loop that may prevent him from governing responsibly. The reality is the president has created this himself. He's created this mess where people are bending over backwards to create his Potemkin village for him because the alternative to, and you used the word earlier, the alternative is presidential tantrums. And then White House staffers who don't support that Potemkin village and give him that rosy scenario are not going to be White House staffers any longer.
That's right. That's right.
So he's created this. And I have to tell you, Bill, to me, this is so sad, disappointing, disheartening, because here's the thing. I'm a business owner. And you're in business for yourself too, Bill. You're a business owner.
That's right. Yeah.
And and Trump is supposed to be some brilliant business person. And by many measures of success, I would maybe argue partial truths, he's very successful. But here is one thing that I know from having been in business for, 3 or 5 years here, is that if you want to have a successful business, you cannot have your blinders on. You have to hire to your weaknesses.
Right.
And surround yourself with people who know more than you do. Part of being a great leader in business, and I'm not going to pretend I know everything about being a great leader in government because I've never held a government position, but I do know business. And if you're going to be a great leader in business, you're going to guide your company to success. You're going to provide more jobs for people. You're going to be a profitable company so you continue to be around in the future.
That's right.
You need to recognize that you don't know everything and that that's not a character flaw. And that you can hire people who know things you don't to bring you information, to bring you truth so you can make the right decisions to move forward as a company. And this is what the president should know, having been in business. Regrettably, he either hasn't learned that lesson or doesn't care about it. And his own
Well, he just puts people around him that don't necessarily support the things called measurable success. He's not really measuring things. He's providing a narrative of great, outstanding, wonderful, optimistic. We can't give them the negative. And he has done a great job at selling the gingerbread house. He has done a great job of selling the Hansel and Gretel of his base, the Republicans that enjoy eating that candy. Of look at this guy, he's an in-your-face guy, and he's taking it out on those Democrats that are XYZ, and what happens is that they're going to be sitting in eventually. When we start facing the adult things that we need to start facing as a nation and grow up, because this is a little bit of our World War II, and we're on the back end of this one. We've got a restoration project to go on. We've got a remodeling job to do on America. Things like respect and recognition and acknowledgement and trust and truth-telling. All of those things are a part of the restoration. There's a dismantling of the Potemkin village that needs to take place. Welcome, Joe Biden, to your first year, is dismantling the village. Then you've got to hire a reconstruction project to go, okay, here's all the positions that weren't being, all the departments that weren't being run under Trump because he never staffed them. There's no movement on this thing that was focused on, Southeast Asia, and this thing that was focused on, on Europe, and all these different people that used to like keep our respect, recognition, acknowledgement, what we stood for in place, and rebuild, second year of Biden's, rebuild the relationships so they can kind of trust us again. Now, rebuilding skill and competency, that's going to be a little bit of a stretch, because we were not there to help the rest of the world. We weren't. And we were not even there to help ourselves.
It's pretty tough when you've been viewed
that's
as...
That's been really, really tough. That is really, really tough.
Well, yeah, it's tough when the world perceives the United States as the country of blame and shame, which is really what the president has done in the world. Is he's blaming and shaming NATO, blaming and shaming the World Health Organization, blaming and shaming other countries, blaming and shaming the immigrants that come in from other countries. I mean, it's just
whatever Target
ending.
will sell, whatever Target will sell, that our gingerbread house is perfect, and these other people are stealing our candy, and you better prevent people from taking a candy, so therefore we need a wall in order to keep them out from our candy. And instead of going like, wait a minute, that's not the job of this government. Stability, safety, consistency, protection, support, use government to support capitalism, to support the economy. See, government's, it's not meant, you don't want to dismantle government so that capitalism runs it. You want to make sure that government has enough for capitalism to sit on top of it. That's when the machine really runs, is like you pour the foundation for the floor to run on, and you build the house of capitalism on top of it, and government sits underneath and going like, yeah, there's things that are going to go wrong here in capitalism, and we're going to be there to fix the airline industry or this industry or that industry, because there's a lot of jobs that are dependent upon that, and we need to do a better job with that. So, some ways to think about this is that if we have people that are bad contractors, that's what's in the White House right now. Contractors that are just giving him pieces of lumber to say, yeah, we have this really great piece of 2x4. There's a stack of rotten 2x4s, but we're not showing you those. We're just going to show you the one. Here, these papers, go out and do the interview on Axios, because this one piece of paper is going to help you. Now, meanwhile, the reporter is going like, but I see the stack of rotted wood over there that you're not looking at.
Honestly,
he goes, but wait, look at this 2x4. Wait, look at this. And the expression on your face is great.
That was an extraordinary moment. That was an extraordinary moment in that interview that, quite honestly, I mean, Trump bears responsibility for it because he put himself in the position to be there,
Okay,
being ill-informed.
pause.
But,
Wait.
oh,
You cannot, that sentence.
Oh, is that bad?
Trump needs to take responsibility for. See that one?
Yeah.
It's like you asking your daughter to take responsibility about the move for the house.
Okay.
They cannot. I want the listeners to not get enraged as an adult, because I'm getting enraged and you're getting enraged in a good way. It's positive. It's vibrant, and it's vibrant, Tom. But you didn't do anything wrong, by the way.
No. I love it when you call me out on something. But that's great. But my point was that Trump didn't take responsibility for being informed to be able to answer questions, right? But he was prepared by his staff, and they didn't prepare him either for here's the reality, but you don't want to talk about that. You want to pivot to this.
It's unavailable. Keep going to the word unavailable and you'll feel better.
Okay.
It's unavailable to be able to give him information, him to process it, and him for deliver a consistent message. It's unavailable.
Okay.
It's not available.
I've just never seen anybody in his position, like a president, walk themselves out on a plank and jump off the way that Trump did right there. I mean, seriously. I mean, it's like, it was hard to watch, and I can't,
and they
willingly sat down for that interview.
Trick. The people that are trying to protect him is saying media is tricking him. It's like he's underskilled. He's not doing an adult communication about being honest.
I mean, it's interesting
that,
the way you talked about it. If the president were, more skilled or able to think in the moment, he would have done what you suggested a few minutes ago, which is saying, you're right, Jonathan, there's a lot of deaths every day, and we are moving heaven and earth to slow that down as fast as we can. We're doing this, we're doing that, we're doing the other thing, and focus on what they're doing instead of focus on the number. Like you said, he has probably a lot of good things he could talk about, but he doesn't do that. He
doesn't have the range and ability to talk through a plan. He's the guy that holds the brand, the name that you tack on the outside of the building, and then all the other contractors, either low-cost contractors, mid-range contractors, or in some cases high-end contractors that are able to work with him, know how to navigate around. So you would like that? Great. I'll put a gold toilet seat in there. Sure. You want a gold toilet seat inside a plane? Yep. But it weighs too much, Mr. President. I want a gold seat. Great. We'll put a gold seat inside the plane. And the plane can't fly because, it's using gas mileage. And it's like, but I don't want the fact of how much gas the plane's using because it's flying around a golden toilet seat. It's like, why do you need a golden toilet seat? I'll spray paint it golden. It's like, so the mindset is that I'm just looking for doing I want to be there for the unveiling of the gingerbread house. How long it lasts, how long the candy stays there until it goes stale. I'll keep spray painting varnish over it so it never goes away. And that's a little bit what's happening is that if you think about a candy house that you're not eating, and all that happens is the parent says, oh, my kid loves this thing, I better spray varnish over it or spray plastic over it so the thing just stays up there and it just looks the way it does. But really you can't eat it. You really can't do anything with it, but it looks good. It really looks well.
Oh my gosh. To me, I'm going to drift into labeling here for a second because I can't help myself.
It helps us. It helps us. Yeah. It helps
I just reading these articles, learning about what's happening in the White House. I'm coming to see that this is an ostrich presidency, where the ostrich buries its head in the sand because it doesn't want to hear the bad news. And it's more than just the president. Senior administration officials in this Post article were quoted as saying, White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows who's responsible for coordinating the entire White House, is the one that in their morning, daily meetings at 8 a.m. is no longer interested in, he's become increasingly skeptical of the two physicians, Deborah Birx and Anthony Fauci. And he's routinely questioning their expertise to the point where he no longer holds that a daily 8 a.m. meeting that includes health professionals to discuss the pandemic. Instead, he's huddling in the mornings with half a dozen politically oriented aides. And when the virus comes up, their focus is more on how to convince the public that the president has it all under control, rather than on actually doing the hard work on planning ways to contain it and to fix it. And to me, this is even worse than just the president being the main ostrich with his head in the sand. Now the people around him that are supposed to be, providing him information so he can properly govern are putting their hands in the sand, and they're removing themselves further from the truth.
Right.
This is a really scary situation for us as a nation.
Well, it's scary from the perspective of is that how much of the Potemkin house or the gingerbread house that we need to dismantle. I mean, the amount of time that Joe Biden is going to need to spend on doing this, because, that we can't, I mean, it would be extremely painful and extremely difficult and very, very close to catastrophic if he gets reelected, close to.
Right.
Because then it's who's going to steal what from who. That's what shows up in the next presidency. It's who's going to steal what from who. What's on the auction block? Who's going to steal from what? Right. So, see the results. I mean, if they're just convincing the public that the president has it under control, it's sort of like feeding. It's sort of like feeding a giant, that whenever the giant wakes up, you better throw some red meat in there. You better just feed it. And regrettably, this particular giant, although, most unknowingly doing this, is this being fed people in the forms of the lives of the pandemic victims. That's what the red meat is. I mean, just to put the bigger metaphor in place here, is that we can't, when you just talk about the gingerbread house, when you just talk about Hansel and Gretel coming up to this house made of candy, there's no discussion of the oven in the back that is being meant to cook the children or cook the young people so that they can fit in there so the witch can eat. I mean, it's literally his childhood trauma is the ovens in the back. If you don't believe in and if you don't do things the way this gingerbread house is set up, as a child, you will be cooked in the back. And that's with the book of Mary Trump, that's that family. That's what that family did. And they had that kind of feel to it, is that, it's the giant, would eat whoever is available to eat in the form of, competitiveness between siblings. And who's the one that's going to get the day? Well, the one that's going to pretend the same way the patriarch is pretending.
Ugh,
so it's very, very painful to go through. So now, it's disturbing to watch us go through this. It's uncomfortable to have the American family have to face this form of this type of family that we have, in our midst. And, we want to bring the best way through this is being to start dismantling this is to start gently being compassionate to the voter that voted for Trump, gently being compassionate to them, because we can't point our finger and say, listen, you never should have went and left your house and found the candy thing and be enticed by the witch. The answer is, sorry, she was offering cookies. And Trump offered cookies. It was like, just to use a metaphor, it's like he went to the hen house, got the egg, promised that he was going to cook the egg, give it to the kid, give it to the entire family, then magically put the egg back together so it could be hatched into a chick. See, Trump sold the entire, I can have the egg, cook it, eat a meal from it, and it'll still be alive at the end, and it'll hatch and everything will be fine. He sold that entire narrative of, you can do the preconditions, you can have this thing, it's the best healthcare ever, and none of that is available to us. You've got to make the hard choice of, well, who's paying? How much is it really going to cost? What is it really going to take to be accountable? How can we be honest about the accountability? How can we bring bad news to and promise, not overpromise, to sell the gingerbread house with all the gumdrops and icing and.
Well, it's interesting. I want to take this gingerbread house metaphor one step further, and to do this, I'm going to bring in a very recent commercial created by the Lincoln Project we've talked about before. I don't know if you've seen this one, Bill, or if you subscribe to their channel, but
I do, but I don't. I
don't know when they're planning to air it, or if it's meant only for YouTube, or maybe they're going to run it in an extensive ad buy during the Republican convention. But there's literally this more than 6-minute commercial the Lincoln Project put out, which I know immediately you might say, oh, that's scary, it needs to be short messages. Well, but it was actually quite amusing in many respects. But really, think of the gingerbread house you're just talking about being the construct that, the administration and Trump wants everyone to believe. Well, the way this is the scene is in a hospital room, and there's this family, 3 or 4 family members gathered around this patient who went into a coma shortly after the 2016 election when Trump was elected. But the guy has just woken up 3.5 years later. And he's awoken to his family greeting him, oh, we're so glad to have you back. This is wonderful. And his family is clearly I would say, are Republicans, right? Is the idea that they're Republicans. And they're explaining to him, he's asking, well, what's happened in the last few years? And they're explaining to him. And as they explain to him things that have happened, he's like, oh, the Republicans will just absolutely skewer Trump for that. Yeah, well, no, they didn't. Or that, and everything that they talk about, he then brings up what any Republican would have said about it pre-Trump, whatever event that occurred, and then it's breaking down all of Trump's talking points and Republican talking points today. And in a way, it's interesting. The reason I brought it up is because it's kind of giving empathy toward the Republicans for what they believed and thought and their values and they fought for. Wow. But then they keep the family keeps, bringing the reality of the situation. And then he's the guy waking up is saying, oh, well, we don't support that. We don't want that. Well, no, I don't know about that. And so the family keeps sort of trying to steer his ship to wherever Trump is. And the patient waking up is in this disbelief of, okay, I know I was in a coma, but is this a parallel universe? Because we don't believe that. We don't want that. We don't want this. And yet here's where they are. So it's very interesting how it's done. And I'll post I'll embed the video in the blog post.
I haven't seen that one yet. All so right, I'm delighted to hear that.
Well, we could potentially do a whole episode, so. Unpacking that one. But it's really interesting. And your gingerbread metaphor, I think, is very appropriate in that regard. And all of these things we're talking about with the Potemkin village today are a construct to try to get people the people of America and the people outside of America to believe certain things that are not true. And it is, to me, some of the scariest purchasing of truth, because again, as a business person, you don't want to run a business that way. Why do you want to run a country that way?
That's right, and that's the a government needs to stay in its lane of safety, stability, progress, protection, providing the foundation for capitalism to run, not to be efficient. I can order masks whenever I want to. Well, not 3 million of them. You can't. You see what I mean? It's got to have a stockpile. It's got to have things that they're going to buy and not use. Government, it's okay if you buy something and you don't use it, because if you need it, it has to be there. And
well, and also just think about there's lots of people today, and we're in August of 2020. There are lots of news outlets that keep running Trump's greatest hits since January of we've only got 5 cases. It's really not a problem in the United States. Oh, we've only got 15 cases. And, then in April, or maybe it was before April, in April, the thing, it's when it gets warmer, it's just going to go away. The entire president's greatest hits of either denial or just, trying to sell the American people.
It's happy talk.
We have it under control and it's going away.
We're
Meanwhile,
adults here. We have
deaths keep climbing, and you gotta, you gotta stop with all this and actually face facts where you are.
Yeah. Well, the thing to have empathy for is that when somebody's wealthy, we're not going to be looking at wealthy people the same moving forward. We're not. A wealthy person that says, I have the best people. No, you don't. You have a bunch of money and it's buying you cover. You don't have the best people working for you. You have people working for you. And whether or not they're the best people, that's hard to say, because this rich person has shown us that you can be rich and so rich that you can have very mediocre and poor and even not good people around you and still have the cover to become president. It means that type of selling, it'll be very hard.
Well, I agree with you, Bill. I agree with you. That's a very interesting point, is that when you have money, you can afford to make more mistakes and not fall from, being the king of the hill. It's actually, but here's the thing though, most often it's like a Ponzi scheme where sales can cure all for a while. You keep getting more sales in, you keep getting more revenue, then that can cover really poor efficiency in the back room.
Yes.
Or in the ranks of your business. It can do it. But at some point, if that revenue falters at all, then the whole thing's a house of cards and it falls down. That's not a healthy company. So people can be rich, wealthy, like you said, and be horribly unsuccessful. They're just successful enough. Their wealth is allowing them to be bad business people.
Exactly. And it's easy to get excited about a promise, but it's very difficult to get to be honest about something that's not working or that you've been taken, and you got to go like, yeah, I needed to vet that a little more. The person was pushing their agenda at my expense. So I think that there's still this thing that we need to get to around this Potemkin house, which is, how is Joe Biden, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party are going to come together and work on this when the great divider is still money that they need from their donors? Like, how is that going to take place when there's these elected officials on the right and the Democrats on the rest? All of them have to raise money, so much money. They've got to go to big donors to do that. And the big donors have moved to the place of, I want something for my money, not I want something for America. I want the value of my money to be paid in tax breaks, instead of, I want what's best for America, and I think you're the man or woman that could do this.
Yeah, I think that's one of our big systemic problems in America, isn't it? The money in politics, and even the Supreme Court ruling that money is equal to free speech. I mean, we have a lot of problems that are getting in the way of what you were asking for, is that I want you because I believe you're a good person and you're going to do the right thing for the country, versus I'm a lobbyist and I'll support you if you do this for me. It's a tit for tat.
Exactly. That's the thing that is so unsettling. I think that there's some work here about the rebuilding of the house, the American brand, respect, and those other things, and all the things that have not been acted upon, that was in our best national interest, but is not in our national, that have been left to, well, look at the money that Trump has saved by not filling all those staff members. Look at the value that he has lost by not staffing those different positions that he did. Here's where the brand has lost things. And I think that, what does purchasing truth and brand America going to look like post-Trump? Because there's a post-Trump somewhere, whether it's in November or whatever. There's a post-Trump somewhere. There's a post-Trump.
Yeah, there definitely is. It's just
what's brand America going to look like?
Yeah.
How soon is it going to be?
Well, and honestly, what kind of brand damage happens to the Republican Party? I mean, that's why the Lincoln Project, the Midas Touch, some of these different organizations are trying to sort of stop the bleeding in the Republican Party now, and are advocating to get rid of Trump now, instead of
they're pretty divided. They're pretty divided now. They're pretty divided now. So they've got the group that used to think that they were getting their values done, and the group that was really just in it for the money. And now those folks are in opposition. It's very similar to, I think the last time it happened to them was the Whigs, when the Whigs separated from the Whigs party had to break into two, and then that was Civil War time. Anyways, all right. Well, more to come on our interesting times, Tom. That's for sure.
Thanks so much, Bill. I really enjoyed this conversation.
All right. Take care. All right. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth Podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.